Welcome everybody to another Indie Dev Spotlight here on Game Wisdom. Each week we play indie games on our Wednesday night streams, and these videos recap at least 6 of them. And unless I otherwise say it, they are all played with press keys, and we are always looking for submissions for future plays. And speaking of which, our first game is a press key submission, and this is Neurodeck. And what we have here is a very fascinating game from an aesthetics and kind of story point of view. So for this one, it takes place inside somebody's mind as they attempt to fight the phobias and fears they have using these cards that represent different therapeutic options, such as hugs, playing video games, drinking, and more. So the general path through the game is fairly fixed. You can see the path along the top of the screen there, and you'll make certain decisions at kind of these resource nodes to either get a new card, duplicate one, upgrade, etc. For the most part though, you're going to be deciding which fear or which phobia to take on next. And they all play out kind of like a boss fight in a sense. The general play of the fight is that the boss's actions, which are those icons underneath his health in the top right, they go in a fixed pattern. Your job, obviously, is to do enough damage to him before he does it to you. Each turn you'll regain stamina, which you can't see because my video screen is blocking in the bottom left. But stamina is used to play cards, while sanity is your overall health. Run out of sanity, you lose the run. You gain more stamina back based on when you decide to end your turn based on the number of cards that you've played. And you can also gain more cards by draining your stamina. So part of the challenge of Neurodeck is that each enemy has its own general style. Our slug or snail looking thing over here likes to power up its block and then goes for damage. Another one that is based on fear of crowds will try and lock you down. And the art, design, aesthetics of this game are really well done. And I just wonder if there's a psychologist on staff who kind of helped them with some of this kind of design. And as the game goes on, the rankings of the phobias go up, which increases the amount of damage it does as well as its health. So you need to kind of figure out what kind of strategy you want to do early to stand a chance. For this part of the play, I was kind of going for using, I think it was anger, to kind of build up my own damage modifier and then do extra damage like that. And there's different play styles based on emotions, and quite a bit to unlock in terms of new cards, characters, and so on. With all that said, though, there are a few issues I have with the game. Unlike some of the other deck builders we've played lately, Neurodeck really doesn't focus on defense. You do have a few cards that let you regain stamina and sanity, but for the most part, these enemies hit very hard. And in a lot of cases, you may only have 2 or 3 cycles of their entire pattern before you will be overwhelmed. And what that means is that it is very RNG dependent on what cards you have in your deck. Now, the version that we played, I believe, is kind of like the final build before it comes out. I don't know if there's any way to actually upgrade cards, as in improve the effect of the card. The upgrade system in the game right now just gives you a new card, regardless of the one that you sacrifice. Now, you can upgrade your stamina and sanity at specific events, but they are rare and only at 10 points a pop to a certain extent. So this does feel like one of those games that you are going to keep winning until you lose, and then that ends the run. There's no way to get around it if an enemy just completely counters your strategy or you just get bad RNG. With that said, I really do like this concept for a game. The animation and the art are fantastic, as I said. I'm curious to see where they go with the game as it leaves early access, or I believe it may just come out into 1.0. So if you're looking for another deck builder roguelike and don't mind facing your fears, I would give Neurodeck a check. For our next game, we turn to what may very well be the greatest name for a video game I have ever seen. This is Josh Journey, which I believe this game was just an historical reenactment of how I saved the world many years ago. But the game is out. This is played as a demo build that was sent to me, but I'm hoping to maybe play the full version at some point. So the story is that this is a 4-player beat 'em up, kind of reminiscent of either River City Ransom or something along the lines of Fight and Rage, Streets and Rage, etc. The big thing, as you can tell by the graphics, is that it has a very impressive art style. It's been described as kind of Steven Universe meets Adventure Time. It really reminds me a lot of Adventure Time itself. So the game is built on either 4-player co-op, or you can play as the different characters yourself and swap between them at will. Each character has different abilities. Josh is your standard swords fighter. Malina, I hope I didn't butcher that too badly, is your ranged spellcaster of water. The anteater looking guy is your heavy bruiser, and Zos is your another kind of mage style character. Each character has a unique skill tree and perks they get as they level up and as you spend points to them. And as you can see, other than me just getting my butt knocked into the air there, a big portion of this game is using combos between them, either with multiple players or swapping, and kind of some of these extended combos, as you can see right there. And I always like when beat-em-ups go that extra mile, with having a greater sense of technical play to them. As the game goes on, you'll unlock new abilities and upgrades, and yes, just like in this game, I can activate a super if the need comes up. And the game definitely has a great feel to it. It may be a little cumbersome switching between 4 characters by yourself, and it does feel like this game is definitely meant to be played at least with 2, maybe even 3 actual players. But there is certainly potential here, and if you are a fan of beat-em-ups, then definitely give this one a check. And, having your name being Josh is just optional in this regard. For our next game, I'm not sure we looked at this in an earlier spotlight as a demo, but I did get the full version to play Going Under, and this is probably a good time to discuss it. So, for those of you who missed it when it first came out, this is an action roguelite, with the kind of story and theme all built around the millennial horror of having to become a paid intern at a major corporation. And yes, there's a lot of jokes about startups and tech companies and so on in this game. So we play as this intern here who has been hired as part of this new company, where unfortunately it turns out that the building they all live in is essentially like a hellish place where failed companies and startups turn into dungeons that you must clear out. So the gameplay itself is going to be focused entirely on action. You pick up objects in the environment that you can use as weapons, and there is durability to them. Better weapons will have more durability and can also come with unique perks alongside of them. Each area has its own assortment of weapons to pick up, and your job is to basically get through each dungeon to the game's boss. Now, persistence comes in the form of unlocking perks with your friendly employees. They require you to do specific tasks, and then by completing them, you can choose them as a mentor, which will give you a perk that will work in that dungeon, and the perks get better as you level up your rating with them. Other than that, you can unlock new items that can show up in future runs, and there are pickable or equipable perks that will change your properties, such as giving you super powerful arms, more health, stun, and so on. So, the general gameplay, again, for action roguelike fans, certainly works, but I did have a few issues with it. Now, when we played this one, I know the game has had several balance updates and content patches since then, so I don't know what has changed since when we played this at 1.0. But one of the big things is that when you start running into heavier enemies who can't be stun locked as easily, you're going to have those cases where your only option is really just try and dance around them as there's just too many enemies attacking you at one time to safely hit them. And the game has definitely some issues when you start running into so much happening at one time that it's not possible for you to really deal with them unless you got lucky and got the right weapons and perks needed. And I found some of the camera controls to be a little bit unreliable, and you'll have situations as you just saw right there where an enemy will hit you from off screen. There's no indication about it, and you have to manually control the camera at all times, as opposed to having kind of the view be centered, similar to something like Hades. Other than that, I think the only real issues from a gameplay point of view is that it kind of lacks the persistence of something like Hades, and I think only you're going to hear that a lot about action roguelikes going forward, considering how that's kind of the new benchmark. But I would have liked to have seen more ways to upgrade your character and kind of help supplement your abilities in case you get bad RNG. The only things that are kind of permanent upgrades occur after you beat up a boss, but that implies you're going to be able to get that far into it. And when I played this, we got as far as kind of the quote-unquote second loop, when you have to go back through the dungeons in their harder variant. And it just got so annoying to fight these enemies that I kind of lost some motivation to keep playing. If you are looking for a stylistically different action roguelike, I would say give this one a check, but if you haven't played something like Hades yet, that is still again like the de facto standard. With that said, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we have 3 more games to look at in this video. And now for a quick thank you to our current Patreon supporters. And if you're interested in my books on design, they are available at most major retailers. 20 Essential Games to Study is for first-time developers looking to be inspired, and the Game Design Deep Dive series covers the history and philosophy of major genres, with horror coming later in 2021. For our next one, we turn to Pendragon. This is the latest game from developer of 80 Days, which was kind of a choose-your-own adventure strategy style game. And for this one, they have certainly outdone themselves with a very unique concept. So Pendragon follows kind of the tale trying to find the disappearance of King Arthur. And to do so, you're going to have to go on essentially a choose-your-own-adventure journey across the land. When you start playing the game, you'll pick from different characters, each complete with their own story, as well as how they behave and abilities they get access to. So the gameplay itself is kind of an interesting mix of, in a weird way, a strategy game, a tactical game, and even a chess game, if that all makes sense. How this works is that you move your characters around on this board. Characters have different abilities as well as different behaviors as they move around. Such as moving in a certain direction with a character will cause them to attack anything that was in their way. Other times you want to retreat and kind of alter how that character is to avoid taking damage. Each character can only take a few hits, and so much about this game is on the planning side, with the focus being turn-based. Similar to 80 Days, a lot of your decision making is going to be deciding where you go next. This determines what resources you'll get access to, what fights you'll get, as well as what characters you'll meet, which can extend or expand your party, or unlock that character for their own story on a subsequent playthrough. And this is, I think, one of those games that I don't know if this gameplay loop of kind of, again, choose your own adventure with a mix of various tactical styles will appeal to everybody, but if it does work for you much like 80 Days did, then I think this is a game that you are going to really love. The improvements in terms of gameplay, I think, do help Pendragon a little bit more than 80 Days, but I do feel like it can be a little hard to kind of learn what it is you're supposed to do when you first play it, and a lot of this is built on replayability. So the basic mechanics of a character don't appeal to you, then the majority of this game is just going to be doing it with different characters and seeing their own takes on the story. So ultimately, this game really wasn't for me, I think, but this is definitely one of those titles that, again, if it works for you, you are going to love it. And I would suggest anyone who has an interest, and especially if you enjoyed 80 Days, to give this one a check just to see if it may appeal to you. Up next, we have Astral Gunners. This was played before it came out, but it is currently in early access at the time of this video. And this is an arcade shmup, with a heavy emphasis on dodging lots and lots of bullets, as you can see right here. Our gameplay consists of, I believe at this time, 5 levels. You can play as different characters that have their own kind of standard and super ability. And your mission is to, well, do all the shmupping that you know so well. The game does have multiplayer. I believe you have to use remote play for it. Now, the difficulty of this game is that you have kind of a super move that you can activate in order to gain or block bullets, as well as gain higher multiplier. Your score is very important, because the points that you earn in each play are used to unlock new persistent abilities, such as getting more health, or getting more lives, and so on. And it's a pretty clever idea. Now, one thing you've probably noticed is that the background is very hard on your eyes, and this can be very eye strain inducing. The issue is that it's so detailed that it's kind of taking over your viewpoint as you're trying to pay attention to all the bullets and enemies coming at you. And at this point, there really wasn't much else to say about Astral Gunners. Each character has their own kind of shot style and special. One actually kind of like teleports around. I believe everyone gets access to a kind of a basic dash that gives you slight iframes, but I don't remember 100%. And this does feel like an overall solid shmup. While I don't think it does too much outside the box, if you are looking for another game, especially if you have a friend to play with, then give this one a check and you may enjoy it. For our final game in this spotlight, we have Worm Jazz. This is a puzzle game that, in a way, is kind of a combination of the classics Bomberman and Snake. Our story is that we play this hungry worm who also really likes jazz. And your mission in each level is to eat up all the food and make it to the exit. Now, the challenge of the game is twofold. Similar to Snake, as you eat, your character's length will go up, which means, of course, in very tight spaces, you can get yourself trapped like that. Now, the other point is that as you eat bombs, you are able to blow things up, and you'll have to, basically, your body will contort back down based on how it was exploded. And it will go, and your body will basically shrink back down to right at that point of the green bar, or the green lump on his body there. And of course, if you want to get multiple stars, you need to eat up all the food. Sometimes we get a bonus collectible. And it basically is one of those games where it's probably going to be hard enough just to get a 1 star in a lot of cases, but you're going to really have to work for things if you want to get the coveted 3-star reward. And as the game goes on, the maps get larger and new elements get introduced. Overall, this does feel like another very solid puzzle game. My main issue with this one, as with a lot of the ones that we've played, is that it is very much a linear solution. Each level really only has one way to play it if you want to stand any chance of getting even just the 1-star reward. And then once you've learned it or you've looked it up, you kind of lose some of the element of it. And there doesn't seem to be a greater story. All the levels are just kind of set up in this hub space, which will then unlock the next hub, and you get bonus stuff again by getting more and more stars. So overall, I don't know if I would say Worm Jazz is my favorite puzzle game that I've played, but it is just yet another really, I think, average or solid example. And if you are a fan of these kinds of puzzle designs, then check this one out. But if you're hoping for this game to do anything new or unique with its mechanics, I don't think that's going to work for you. But with that said, we are going to wrap up this spotlight here. I would like to thank all the developers who submitted games. You'll find links to their titles in the description down below. Again, if you let me tackle your game in the future, please get in touch and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where we are in science of games. Until next time, take care.